You'd think I'd be used to it by now. The smug little jabs, the harmless jokes that always seem to have my name on them. But something about that night, something about the way Kyle looked me dead in the eye and said it, like I was a parasite clinging to his success, struck a nerve I didn't know I still had. We were at Kessler's, the kind of restaurant with white tablecloths and plates that look like modern art. Mom had insisted we all dress up to celebrate the happy couple. Kyle's engagement dinner. His third one, actually. But this time, he claimed, she was the one. Her name was Alana. Gorgeous, in that Instagram-filtered way. Blonde, polished, and allergic to carbs. She'd barely touched her seared tuna. I had just passed the bread basket when it happened. Kyle swirled his wine like he thought he was a sommelier, looked at Alana, then glanced at Mom and said, "You know, I'm just glad I don't have to carry everyone in the family anymore." Mom sipped her Chardonnay, like she was bracing herself. I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Kyle laughed. "Oh, come on. You know what I mean, Jenna. You've always had it easy. No real risk. Just a cozy little job. No mortgage. No kids. No ambition." I stared at him, stunned. But he wasn't done. "You don't build empires with Excel sheets," he added with a smirk. "Some of us have to actually hustle." And then he said it. "She's like a leech. She's always been one." My fork froze midair. Alana giggled. Mom, my own mother, smiled. Smiled. "Oh, Kyle," she said, not even glancing at me. "Don't tease your sister on your big night." Tease? That was what she called that? I felt the burn behind my eyes, that familiar mix of shame and fury. I could have said something right then. I could have reminded Kyle, loudly, that I co-signed the loan that got his empire off the ground, that I put my own credit, savings, and sanity on the line because Mom begged me to help him just this once. But I didn't. I sat there, blinking away the sting, nodding along as if I were part of the joke. I watched Kyle laugh and pour more wine, watched Mom fawn over Alana's ring and talk about venues, watched the server refill everyone's glass except mine. And I made a decision. Not loudly, not publicly, not with drama. Quietly. Surgically. That was the last night I would let them pretend I owed them something. That was the night I decided to stop protecting Kyle from the one person who'd always cleaned up his messes. Me. After dinner, I went straight home, still wearing my dress, heels clicking against my hardwood like punctuation marks. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't cry. I sat down at my desk, turned on my laptop, and opened the loan file. The one with both our names on it. The one Kyle conveniently forgot about. My name was still the primary guarantor. He'd used my credit rating to get approved. I'd even covered 2 payments last year when his cash flow was tight. I scrolled through the documents like a surgeon studying an X-ray. Every signature, every date, every red flag I'd ignored in the name of family. And when I saw the recent delinquency notice, 2 payments missed, I didn't flinch. I clicked save. Then I opened a new tab and searched for a real estate attorney. What they didn't know was that I'd kept receipts. Literal receipts. Scanned bank transfers, PDFs of check deposits, even texts where Kyle thanked me for saving his ass with the bank. And I'd never used them. Never even mentioned them. Because for years I was told that's what good sisters do. But good sisters don't get called leeches by the brother whose life they quietly funded. Good sisters don't sit at dinner while their mother laughs at their expense and swirls her wine like that's normal. No. That night I became something else. Not bitter, not petty, precise. Because Kyle had forgotten something crucial. Something that would come back to haunt him. He thought I was weak. But I had the one thing that makes people like him squirm. Power. And I was done pretending I didn't. You know what's funny? When someone calls you a leech, what they're really doing is projecting. Kyle wouldn't know what it's like to stand on his own if you handed him a manual and a decade. His version of independence was leaning on other people, then making sure no one remembered who held him up. But I remembered. I remembered the panic in his voice when he called me 2 years ago, voice cracked with desperation, swearing he just needed a little help to get started. He had just come back from some startup retreat in Arizona, all fired up about opening his own bar and grill, said it was his dream, a rustic chic concept that millennials will eat up. He had no credit, no collateral, and a debt trail behind him long enough to wrap a city block. But Mom was sold. "Help your brother," she said. "This could be his big break." I wanted to say no. I really did. I'd spent years patching up after his wreckage. But the guilt worked. It always did. She reminded me of how I didn't have kids, didn't have a husband, how I had less to worry about. That one stung. So I signed. I co-signed a $250,000 loan with the bank to get him his dream bar. Kyle promised he'd pay every cent, that I wouldn't have to lift a finger. He even called me the best sister in the world, and sent flowers afterward. I saved the card. I don't know why. It took all of 2 months before the first late payment came in. I didn't tell anyone. I covered it. Then the second one came. He blamed staff turnover. I covered it again. When I finally asked him to be more careful, he flipped, told me I was micromanaging him, that I should be grateful he was letting me be part of something real. Letting me? Like I was a lucky tag-along. I bit my tongue, I always did, because when it came to Kyle, that was the silent contract. He gets to mess up, I get to fix it, and no one ever hears about it. But that night at Kessler's, something broke. It wasn't just the insult. It was how easy it was for him to say it. How natural it was for Mom to laugh. Like they truly believed I was nothing but an accessory to Kyle's story. The truth is, Kyle had been living on borrowed time, borrowed money, borrowed reputation, and most of it borrowed from me. He wasn't a businessman. He was a walking illusion, puffed up by family loyalty and a few viral posts on Instagram that made his bar look trendier than it was. Half the decor came from my storage unit. The sound system? My old one, from college. He never paid me back for that either. But I was done keeping score in the dark. It was time someone turned the lights on. I dug into everything. Bank statements, loan records, title deeds. His business was incorporated under a joint name, but I held legal authority to freeze the account if there were signs of fiscal mismanagement. The signs were everywhere. His last tax filing was a mess. His vendor payments were delayed. The lease on the liquor license was overdue. He hadn't just dropped the ball, he'd kicked it into traffic. And through all this, he was planning a wedding like he was royalty. Custom suits, a vineyard venue, imported flowers, using money from our business loan. That's when the shift happened in my mind. I stopped thinking like a sister, and I started thinking like a creditor. Because that's what I was now. Not family, not dead weight. I was the woman who kept his empire standing. And I could be the one who watched it fall. I printed everything, stacked the documents into a crisp, neat binder, called my lawyer the next morning and scheduled a meeting. When she flipped through the pages, she raised her eyebrows. "You have a case," she said. "You have leverage. And quite frankly, you have a damn good reason to use it." It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about balance. It was about looking in the mirror and remembering that I wasn't weak, that I hadn't been some background character in Kyle's hero story. I was the one who quietly made it possible. And he repaid me by calling me a leech. When I walked out of that lawyer's office, binder in hand, I wasn't furious anymore. I was focused. Kyle had written his own ending the second he opened his mouth at that dinner. Now all I had to do was deliver it. My mother always told me, "Keep your image clean. People don't forgive women for being messy." And she lived by that motto like it was scripture. Ironed tablecloths, perfect centerpieces, pastel scarves for every season. It wasn't about warmth or closeness. It was about presentation. So it made sense that she adored Kyle. He was shiny, loud, flashy enough to distract from the dysfunction. Growing up, he was the prince, the favorite. He broke vases, cursed at teachers, totaled a car at 17, and still got hugs and pie when he came home. Me? I brought home straight A's, kept curfews, never caused drama, and somehow, I was the disappointment, the burden, the spinster daughter with the serious face and the practical shoes. I remember one Thanksgiving, I wore a new navy blue sweater. Mom pulled me aside and whispered, "Try a softer color next time, darling. That one makes you look severe." Meanwhile, Kyle arrived 30 minutes late, reeking of beer, and she said, "At least he made it." That's how it always was. I showed up. He breezed in late and got applause. And I accepted it. For years. Because when you grow up in a house where love feels conditional, tied to how little space you take up, you start believing that being small is noble, that being invisible is love. But love doesn't humiliate you at a dinner table. Love doesn't laugh when your name is dragged through dirt for sport. So no, this wasn't just about the loan, or the business, or even Kyle. It was about finally seeing my family clearly. After the dinner, I didn't return Mom's calls. She left me a voicemail a few days later. "I hope you're not still sulking over a little joke. Kyle didn't mean it. He's under a lot of pressure planning this wedding. You know how men are. Don't ruin the mood with your moods." There it was again. That line she'd used since I was 10. Your moods. Never mind my feelings. Never mind that I'd been insulted in public. The real crime, in her eyes, was that I might embarrass the family by not pretending everything was fine. I played the voicemail 3 times, then deleted it. I didn't owe her grace anymore. I stopped by the bar that weekend. Not to drink, just to observe. The place was busy, busy enough to look successful if you didn't check the books. Fairy lights hung above the outdoor patio. Waitresses wore matching flannel shirts and carried trays of overpriced sliders. Couples posed for selfies in front of the chalkboard mural that read, "Kyle's Kitchen, where good vibes sizzle." Kyle stood behind the bar, laughing like a man with no worries. He didn't see me. I walked past the side entrance where the deliveries were being unloaded. A young man in a hoodie was arguing with the driver. "Look, I'm just the bartender," the guy said. "I don't know anything about a delayed payment. You'll have to call Kyle." The driver swore under his breath and wheeled the kegs back into his truck. Strike one. Later that night, I checked the county records. The property was still co-owned. The business was operating on borrowed capital, and the lease Kyle had signed for the back patio expansion? Not yet approved. Strike two. But I wasn't swinging yet. Not until I had everything lined up. Because that's what Kyle never understood. While he bluffed and boasted his way through life, I watched, calculated, learned how to play the long game. He liked to win loudly. I was going to win silently. The next morning, I pulled out the Christmas photo from 2 years ago. We were standing in front of the fireplace at Mom's house. Kyle had his arm around Alana, his new love back then, and Mom was holding the dog like it was her second child. I was in the corner, holding a tray of cookies I'd baked, wearing a sweater she'd said made me look older than necessary. Kyle was pointing at something off camera, mid-laugh. I stared at his face in that photo for a long time, and I whispered, "Smile now, Kyle. You'll need it for what's coming." You learn a lot about someone when you follow their financial trail. That's something I picked up after years of managing budgets for other people's companies, watching executives pretend to be brilliant while quietly burning cash like birthday candles. The difference was, I didn't expect it from my own brother. I should have. I sat down at my dining table with a fresh legal pad, a cup of black coffee, and a USB drive filled with documents I'd saved over the last year. Bank statements, wire transfers, vendor payment logs, copies of emails Kyle forwarded asking me to handle just this one thing, please. I had folders labeled with dates, amounts, and one word across each. Repaid? The answer was always no. The loan we'd taken together, the one I'd foolishly co-signed, was structured with me as the primary backer. That had given him the better interest rate and higher approval odds, which he spun as a win for both of us. He was supposed to start making full payments 3 months after the bar opened. He didn't. He missed his third payment, then his sixth. The bank had contacted me, not him, and I had to scramble to wire a lump sum before it hit my credit. I never told him how close I came to default, how I skipped my annual vacation, dipped into my emergency fund, canceled plans to help him avoid financial ruin. And not once did he say thank you. He said, "You're just better with numbers." That was Kyle's version of gratitude, a backhanded compliment with a splash of condescension. Now, staring at the data, I felt something shift in me, a cold sort of clarity. The business account linked to the loan had a long list of flagged transactions: $1,900 for a wedding coordinator, $1,200 for a DJ deposit, and one marked gift registry upgrades, all pulled from the shared funds meant to manage business expenses. Then there was the liquor license fee, marked unpaid. If left too long, it could get revoked. The cherry on top? A recent overdraft, and another letter from the bank, this time warning of potential foreclosure due to inactivity and breach of terms. It was signed and time-stamped. I printed it, stapled it to the top of the pile, labeled it Catalyst. I made a spreadsheet next, just for my own peace of mind. I looked at the numbers, then at my name, on the original paperwork, on the digital signature, on the liability agreement. Kyle had been using my credit, my protection, my name like it was his to drain. And he had the gall to call me a leech. By 10 p.m., I had everything saved to a secure folder in the cloud and 2 flash drives, one for me, one for my lawyer. I stood by the window, watching the street lamps flicker on, and thought back to when Kyle first pitched the idea of Kyle's kitchen. He'd stood in my apartment, barefoot, holding a stack of scribbled napkins that he called a business plan. "You believe in me, right?" he'd asked. I'd said yes, because at the time, I really did. I believed in the potential he never had to earn. I believed in the brother I'd protected since we were kids. The one I helped hide broken toys from Mom after he threw tantrums. The one I shielded in middle school when he was failing classes, staying up late to help him do homework while he played video games. The truth is, I wasn't just his safety net. I was his unpaid insurance policy, a silent investor in a life he never respected. But now, I didn't believe anymore. The next morning, I called the real estate attorney I'd found a few days earlier, a woman named Valerie Owens. Sharp, direct, the kind who doesn't ask if you're sure, she just tells you what you can do. "I have ownership of a commercial property," I said. "It's in default. I want to know what my options are." She didn't blink. "We can freeze accounts, force a sale, serve a foreclosure notice. Your co-owner? That's more than enough." I paused. "And if he objects?" She replied without hesitation. "He can try, but you've got the paper trail. And if you've got receipts, Miss Carter, then you've got power." I emailed her everything that afternoon. Power. That word stayed with me long after I closed my laptop. Kyle had spent years pretending he was in control, but all he really had was my permission. And that was officially revoked. There's something oddly liberating about shifting your role from the family fixer to a silent force of reckoning. I used to think loyalty meant cleaning up other people's messes with a smile. That if you loved someone enough, if you proved your devotion long enough, they'd stop treating you like an option. I was wrong. Loyalty, when weaponized by the ungrateful, becomes a leash. And Kyle had been yanking on mine for years, but that leash had snapped, quietly, cleanly, and now I was the one holding the collar. 3 days after my meeting with Valerie, I drove down to Kyle's bar unannounced. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street in a shaded lot and just watched. The bar looked lively. People laughing on the patio, music thumping low from inside, servers bustling in and out with trays of craft beer. The illusion was still intact. On the surface, it looked like a thriving dream. But I knew what was rotting underneath. I spotted Kyle out back, chatting with someone in a fitted gray suit, probably a vendor. He was all hand gestures and fake confidence. Then I saw the man shake his head, pull a folded paper from his pocket, and point at it. Kyle's shoulders stiffened. When the man walked away, Kyle kicked a trash can and muttered something sharp enough that a passing employee winced. That was the first real crack I'd seen. And I wasn't done. That night, I opened the shared loan portal again. The delinquent notices were now stacking. The business account was officially in breach of agreement, and I had full rights to invoke a freeze due to non-compliance. Valerie filed the paperwork the next morning. We requested a temporary freeze of all outgoing funds connected to the business, excluding essential utilities. Within 48 hours, Kyle's debit cards bounced. His vendor payments halted. The financial stream he'd been siphoning from dried up. I expected an angry call. I even charged my phone and kept it close. But Kyle didn't call me. He called Mom. And of course, she called me. "Jenna, what did you do?" she snapped. No hello. "Good morning to you too," I said flatly. "Don't get smart. Kyle's account is frozen. His bank is saying something about a co-owner freeze. He's panicking. He says it could ruin everything." I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "Then he shouldn't have violated the loan agreement," I said coolly. "You always go overboard. Why didn't you just talk to him first?" "Because every time I talk, no one listens," I replied. "And frankly, I'm done performing loyalty to people who mock me at dinner tables." She scoffed. "So this is about your ego?" "No, Mom. It's about accountability. Something you've spent your whole life helping him avoid." She sputtered. "Jenna, he's your brother." "And I was his business partner," I snapped, "until he turned my trust into a joke. He used me. Now he gets to face the consequences." She went quiet. For the first time in a long time, I felt her grasping for words and finding none. I ended the call with 4 words. "Tell him to lawyer up." That night, I received an email. No subject line, just 3 lines of text. "What the hell are you doing?" "You're going to regret this." "I won't forget it." Kyle never signed it. But he didn't have to. The tone reeked of entitlement, the kind that grows in men raised by mothers who excuse everything and sisters who fix everything. Well, not anymore. The next step was liquidation. Valerie advised we begin contacting buyers, quietly. Since the property title was joint, I had legal rights to sell my share, or force a full sale if the other owner was in breach. Kyle hadn't responded to the official notice. He hadn't paid the past due amounts. And the wedding? It was less than 3 weeks away. I told Valerie to move forward. We listed the property to a network of commercial investors. Within days, 3 offers came in. I reviewed each one, highlighted the one from a restaurant chain known for flipping local spaces into upscale bistros. The offer was clean, all cash. I circled it, initialed the bottom, and just like that, Kyle's little kingdom was no longer his. I'd spent most of my adult life being told I was too emotional to make hard choices, but this wasn't emotional. This was surgical. Kyle made a bet that I'd never fight back, that I'd always forgive, always fold. And the worst part? He believed it with his whole chest, because Mom did too. Because they both saw my silence as softness, my patience as passivity. But what they didn't understand, what they never cared to understand, is that quiet people don't stay quiet forever. Some of us wait. We study, we document. And when we strike, it's not loud, it's final. There's something viciously clarifying about betrayal, Not just the act, but the ease with which the betrayer sleeps afterward. Like it cost them nothing. A week after the account freeze, I stopped by Mom's house. I wasn't planning on staying long. I just wanted to drop off a signed family document, something she'd requested before all hell broke loose. Part of me wanted to believe maybe she'd softened since our last call. Maybe she'd had time to reflect. But then I pulled into the driveway and saw Kyle's car. And I heard them. I didn't barge in. I paused just outside the slightly cracked living room window. Inside, they were mid-conversation. Too comfortable, too casual, to think anyone else might hear. Kyle was pacing. "She's being dramatic," he said. "Always had a thing for control. It's how she compensates." Mom sighed. "Jenna's never been good at sharing the spotlight." "She's lucky I even let her be part of the business," he scoffed. "She'd still be rotting behind that desk in her little accounting job if it weren't for me." Let. That word landed like a slap. "She's going to ruin your wedding if we're not careful," Mom added. "We'll have to spin it somehow. Maybe say she's unstable again." Again. I don't know what hit harder, her words, or how easily she said them. Like it was a tactic, like it was truth they could weaponize at will. Then Kyle laughed. "I'll ask her for more money as a peace offering. Guilt still works on her." They laughed together. I backed away from the window slowly, my ears burning, heart pounding. Unstable. Guilt. Lucky. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd done for them, shrunk down to those three concepts. In their eyes, I was still the pathetic spinster who never left, never demanded, never mattered. They hadn't just misunderstood me, they'd rewritten me. I didn't knock. I didn't enter. I drove away in silence, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to gravity. For years, I'd convinced myself that keeping the peace was the higher road, that being the bigger person meant swallowing my own pain for the comfort of others. But what they were doing now, what they had always done, wasn't a misunderstanding. It was targeted cruelty, the kind that wears a polite face and a pearl necklace. And I was done being the family doormat in a cardigan. The next morning, I met with Valerie and gave her the green light for the full transfer of the property sale. "The buyer wants to close before the end of the month," she told me. I nodded. "Perfect." She looked up at me, brows raised. "That's the wedding date, isn't it?" "Exactly." She smiled. "Poetic." It was more than poetic. It was surgical, calculated, fair. I didn't just want Kyle to feel embarrassed. I wanted him to feel the cost of his choices, of his arrogance, of the woman he underestimated because she didn't fight back right away. 2 days later, I received a thick manila envelope from the buyer's legal team. It was stamped, signed, and notarized. Offer accepted. Transaction pending final transfer. All that was left? The formal foreclosure notice. Valerie asked if I wanted it sent by courier or certified mail. I shook my head. "I'll hand it to him myself." I spent the next few days preparing, not just documents, but myself. I wasn't going to walk into that wedding looking like the woman they'd written off, the moody accountant sister in neutral tones. I was going to walk in composed, polished, armed with truth. And when the mic hit Kyle's hand, that's when I'd hit back, with a smile. But before that, I had one more thing to do. I sent my mother a single envelope. No note, no explanation. Inside, a photocopy of the foreclosure document stapled neatly to the first delinquency notice she'd ignored. I never got a reply. But the silence? That was louder than anything she'd ever said to my face. There's a kind of elegance in doing things by the book, especially when the book favors the quiet, patient woman no one ever took seriously. Kyle always believed I was too by the rules to do damage, that I'd crumble under confrontation or maybe cry in a corner while he spun the narrative. He never understood that the best revenge doesn't need a scene. It just needs paperwork. By Monday morning, the final steps were in motion. Valerie emailed me a full summary of the impending foreclosure. It included 2 missed payments, fraudulent use of funds from a co-owned loan, repeated breach of agreement, sale authorization already signed and approved. Legally, we were airtight. The buyer's team had been efficient. Too efficient for Kyle's taste, I imagined. He hadn't yet responded to any formal notices, and we didn't expect him to until the moment he realized what he was losing, which would be very soon. The last piece to fall into place? The delivery of the foreclosure notice in person by me. Not through a messy confrontation, not with screaming, but as a gift, tied up neatly in a white envelope, on the one day he thought everything was going perfectly. I picked out the dress carefully. It was navy silk, structured, sleeveless, with a high neckline that made me look like someone who didn't flinch when people tried to discredit her. I chose a pair of deep plum heels, a silver cuff bracelet, and a fresh cut to my hair. It wasn't about looking glamorous. It was about showing up as the woman they never imagined I could be. The one who could walk into a room and change everything without saying a word. The day before the wedding, Valerie called to confirm the documents were ready. I included a final clause, she said. If he attempts to dispute the sale, he'll need to pay you, in full, within 72 hours, interest included. What are the odds he can? She laughed. Let's just say I'm not worried. Neither was I. Because even if Kyle did come up with the money, the damage was done. The myth of his self-made empire was shattered, and I'd made sure every single piece of that truth was documented. I spent the night before the wedding going through the final folder, the co-signature pages, the overdraft screenshots, the bank letters with my name at the top and his failures at the bottom. I smiled as I slipped the papers into a crisp white envelope, and on the front I wrote, Kyle Carter, for your records. I arrived at the venue the next afternoon 15 minutes before the ceremony. It was a sprawling vineyard, rented for the entire weekend. Rows of white chairs faced a floral arch. There was a string quartet playing something soft and classical. The guests were already seated. I walked in calmly, handed my invitation to a young usher who barely glanced up, and took a seat in the third row from the front. Kyle hadn't seen me yet. Neither had Mom. But Alana did. She turned from the front aisle where the wedding party waited and spotted me. Her expression faltered. Not fear, exactly, but unease. Like she'd seen a shadow where there shouldn't be one. I gave her a polite smile. She turned back toward the altar without smiling back. Kyle came down the aisle 5 minutes later, grinning like he owned the world. Custom tuxedo, champagne boutonniere. His swagger dialed to 11. The applause was loud. The music swelled. He waved like a politician, like a man who'd already won. I held the envelope lightly in my lap. Not yet. The ceremony lasted exactly 24 minutes. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Kyle dipped Alana in a dramatic kiss. Mom wept, people clapped, but I didn't move, because my moment hadn't come yet. During the cocktail hour, I kept my distance, watched from a corner as Kyle made the rounds, laughed with old fraternity friends, hugged Mom as if he'd built this life from nothing. He gave a brief toast at the open bar. To new beginnings, he said, lifting his glass, and to the people who never stopped believing in me. The irony almost made me laugh. Finally, it was time for dinner. A microphone was passed from table to table. People gave short, cheerful speeches. Alana's maid of honor cried. Kyle's friend told an inappropriate joke. Then Kyle stood up again. Before we cut the cake, he said, I just want to thank everyone who made this possible, especially my family. I stood, calmly, smoothly. I walked up to the head table, envelope in hand. Kyle's eyes widened as I approached. Jenna? He asked, laughing nervously. What are you doing? I didn't take the mic. I just placed the envelope on the table in front of him and said, clear and quiet, this is for you, for your records." He didn't open it at first. Everyone was watching now. I stepped back, folded my hands, and waited. He slipped a finger under the flap, pulled out the first page, read the heading: Notice of foreclosure, property and business asset repossession, effective immediately. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Around us, the clinking of glasses faded into silence. People shifted in their chairs. You could practically hear the confusion brewing across the reception tent. "What the hell is this?" Kyle finally muttered, his voice cracking as he flipped through the second and third pages of the foreclosure document, like he was hoping the ending would magically change. It didn't. His fingers shook. His smile vanished. I didn't say a word. I simply stepped aside, graceful, composed, everything they once called cold and unlovable, and took a seat at my original table, facing the head of the room. Mom looked at me from across the crowd, her face contorted in confusion. Then rage. She stood, heel catching awkwardly in the grass, and marched toward the head table just as Kyle reached the back page of the envelope. The final clause. The sale of all physical and financial interests in Carter Holdings LLC, effective this date. To contest this transfer, full reimbursement of the defaulted loan, with accrued interest, must be submitted within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in formal relinquishment of rights and access to all associated business assets, licenses, and property titles. "I don't understand," Alana said, her brows pinched. "What's happening?" Kyle didn't answer. He looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. I watched him try to collect himself, try to stand taller, but the shaking wouldn't stop. He turned to his new wife. "It's a misunderstanding. She's bluffing." I almost laughed. "Is she?" Alana asked. Her voice was sharper now. Then she reached for the papers in his hand and read them herself. When she got to the second paragraph, her eyes widened. She turned to him, horror blooming across her face. "You told me you own the bar." "I do. Well, I did," Kyle stammered. "But she's just mad. This is retaliation." Retaliation. That was his fallback, his safety net, framing me as unstable, emotional, hysterical. But it wasn't working anymore. Because this wasn't a fit of rage. This was business. And I had all the documentation to prove it. "Is this true?" Alana asked him, holding up the papers. "Did you use your wedding funds to cover business debts?" He looked around, panicked. "We can talk about this later." "I think we're talking about it now." He tried to laugh it off. "Babe, this is Jenna. She's always been..." "Smart?" I offered from my table, not even bothering to raise my voice. "Careful? Legally prepared?" He flinched. Then came Mom, storming across the lawn, her pearls swinging, heels wobbling in the grass. She grabbed the folder from Kyle's hand, flipping through the pages as if sheer indignation would rewrite the facts. "What is this nonsense, Jenna?" she hissed. "You're ruining your brother's wedding." I looked up, calm as ever. "No, Mom. He ruined it the day he called me a leech. I'm just delivering the invoice." "You're punishing him for a joke?" "I'm holding him accountable for a loan in my name, one he defaulted on, one he used to fund this." I gestured around us, at the flowers, the crystal glasses, the illusion. "You could have handled this privately." I tried. He ignored bank notices, ignored legal warnings, spent money that wasn't his, so now the silence is over. Her lips pursed like she'd bitten into a lemon. "You've always had a flair for drama." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "No, Mother. I have a flair for facts. You just never cared when they didn't flatter your golden boy." The whispers had started to ripple across the room. People leaning in, hushed tones, wedding guests craning to see the documents, the scene. Some were filming. Of course they were. I didn't care. I wanted the story to spread. I wanted every corner of Kyle's world to hear the truth, not the curated version, not the family-approved mythology, the real one. Kyle was sweating now, collar unbuttoned, tie askew. "Okay," he finally said, trying to regain some composure. "We'll fix it. Just give me time. We'll sit down, go through everything." "I already sat down," I said, rising to my feet. "With lawyers, with bankers, with buyers. This is done." "But my wedding is not my problem." Alana looked at me, then at Kyle, then back at the envelope, and she said quietly, "What else haven't you told me?" His face contorted, caught between fury and desperation. He looked at me like I'd just set fire to his entire life. And maybe I had. But I didn't feel guilt. I felt clean, for the first time in years. I walked out before dessert. The sun had just started to set, casting the vineyard in a warm golden hue. Behind me, voices rose, chairs scraped, tension grew. But I didn't turn around, because I wasn't part of their story anymore. And they weren't part of mine. It took less than 24 hours for the fallout to begin. By the time I got home from the wedding, Kyle had already called me 5 times, each one going straight to voicemail. I didn't bother listening. Whatever he had to say, he'd had years to say it with honesty. That window had closed. Slammed, actually. Then came the messages. Long, unhinged texts, alternating between rage and begging. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You're heartless. Please, just talk to me. There has to be a way to fix this. Mom says you're having some kind of breakdown. You need help. I'll pay you back. Just give me time." I blocked his number. Then Mom called. "You've gone too far, Jenna. This wasn't necessary. Family doesn't treat each other this way." That made me laugh out loud. Family doesn't treat each other this way? Where was that sentiment when they laughed as I was called a leech? Where was that family loyalty when I was the one bailing Kyle out of his self-made disasters? No, they didn't get to play the morality card now. Not when they'd fumbled it for years. I didn't respond. The next morning, I did something simple. Something final. I made a list. A clean, sharp-edged list of everyone who had treated me like a prop in Kyle's success story. The people who'd attended that dinner, who laughed at his jokes, who sat by as I was torn down. And I sat at my desk with a blank sheet of stationery and wrote, "Please consider this my formal disassociation from your narrative. I will no longer be attending family functions, covering financial obligations, or playing the role you wrote for me without my consent. You are free to rewrite history. I am free to no longer care." I printed a dozen copies, one for Mom, one for Kyle, one for each of the aunts and cousins who had called me uptight behind my back, but didn't hesitate to forward me invoices for bridal showers and birthday cakes. I slid each letter into a black envelope. No return address, no smiley face stamp, just closure. But I wasn't done. 2 days after the wedding, I received the final transfer confirmation from Valerie. The bar and property sale had cleared. All legal ownership had been relinquished from Kyle Carter. The check was already in my account. The amount? Enough to cover the loan, the stress, the lawyer fees, and still leave me enough to book a trip I'd been dreaming of for a decade. But that's not what I did first. First, I bought a gift. An expensive one. Kyle's honeymoon was supposed to begin that Friday. Alana had posted all about it on Instagram, pictures of suitcases, passport holders with their initials engraved, captions like, "Forever starts now." So I sent the gift to their hotel in Napa Valley. It arrived the same day they checked in, wrapped in elegant silver paper with a cream ribbon. Inside was a framed photo of Kyle, standing in front of his bar, smiling, with a red foreclosed stamp watermarked across the glass, and a handwritten note that said, "Thanks for everything, especially the laughs. The Leech." I don't know exactly what happened at that resort, but Alana deleted every wedding photo by Sunday and changed her profile to private. A week later, my mailbox held a thin, handwritten card. I almost tossed it until I saw the name at the bottom. Alana. I opened it slowly. Inside there was no anger, no apology either. Just one sentence. He lied to me too. That was all. But it was enough, because it meant the story was cracking from the inside, and I wasn't the villain anymore. I started getting RSVPs, not for weddings or showers, but for silence. Mom didn't call again, neither did the cousins. One by one, the noise died, and in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't in years. Relief. Sometimes people think closure comes with a confrontation, a shout, a breakdown. But real closure? It's the weight that lifts when you finally set down the version of yourself that only existed to serve someone else's comfort. I still had one more thing to do, one more envelope. This one wasn't for them. It was for me. I took all the papers, all the notices, bank statements, printouts of Kyle's texts, and placed them into a large manila folder labeled Final Chapter. Then I put that folder into a fireproof box at the back of my closet. Not to revisit, just to remind myself I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I was right. Weddings are supposed to be celebrations, joyful, ceremonial, full of possibility. But Kyle's wedding day? It felt like a stage built on borrowed time, on lies that had finally outlived their charm. And I walked in holding the truth. I remember the sky that day. It was absurdly clear. No clouds, no warnings, just the kind of pristine blue you'd expect for something picture perfect. But beneath it all, there was tension you could almost smell. The vineyard was extravagant. Rows of white chairs, petals scattered on the grass, gold-rimmed champagne flutes lined up at the ready. Alana had spared no detail. Everything was curated for social media, down to the custom neon sign behind the head table that read, "The Carters est today." And that made me smile, because by the time the cake was cut, that sign would mean nothing. I arrived in the early afternoon wearing the navy silk dress I'd carefully chosen days before. Elegant, sharp, not too flashy, not invisible. The valet took my keys with a smile that faltered slightly when he saw my name on the list. There it was, the discomfort already beginning. I walked past the photo booth, past the caterers arranging prosciutto roses and champagne towers, past the cousins who whispered when they saw me. They didn't expect me to show up, and if they did, they didn't expect me to look unbothered. That's what unnerved them the most. I took my seat at table 12, middle of the room, not quite family, not quite forgotten, and I waited. The ceremony went by in a blur. Flowers, vows, forced laughter. Alana looked stunning, sure. Kyle stood there like a man who believed nothing could touch him, who believed the peak of the mountain was his by birthright. I didn't even flinch when the pastor asked if anyone here objects. I didn't need to object. I just needed time. After the ceremony came the cocktail hour. The guests buzzed around like bees, drinking, posing, complimenting each other's outfits. I stayed seated. I wasn't there to mingle. I was there to deliver. The envelope sat in my purse, heavy with its own quiet power, sealed, pristine, and ready. Eventually, Kyle made his way toward me. He looked smug, glowing from the applause, and maybe the wine. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said, pretending warmth, pretending civility. I met his eyes. I wouldn't miss it. He glanced around. "Try to be cool today, okay? No weird energy." "No worries," I replied. "Today's your day." And it was. For the next 15 minutes. As guests were ushered to the reception tables under the sprawling canopy, the wedding planner took the mic and welcomed everyone. Lights twinkled above, the music softened, silverware clinked. Then the speeches began. Her father went first, then the maid of honor, then one of Kyle's old frat buddies, who made some tasteless joke about strippers that barely landed. And then, as planned, Kyle stood, glass in one hand, mic in the other. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "This day means the world to Alana and me. It's the beginning of something beautiful, something permanent." He looked over at her with fake sincerity, then scanned the room. "And I want to thank the people who helped me get here, the ones who believed in me, who saw my potential before I saw it myself." I tilted my head slightly, waiting. He kept going. "I built my business from nothing. It took risk, sacrifice, guts, but it paid off." That was my cue. I rose, calm and steady. 12 steps brought me to the edge of the head table. Every eye followed me. Kyle blinked, confused. Jenna?" I pulled the white envelope from my purse and set it directly in front of his plate. "What's this?" he asked. I didn't take the mic. I didn't need to. I said 4 words, loud enough for everyone near the front tables to hear. "For your records, Kyle." He stared at it. The envelope didn't move. His hand hovered above it like it might bite. And then, curious as ever, he opened it. It took him 3 seconds to realize what it was, another 5 to process what it meant. You could see it happen in real time, the blood draining from his face, the breath catching in his throat, the smile dissolving, the illusion crumbling. Alana leaned in. "What is it?" He didn't answer. She grabbed it, read the first line, and froze. A beat later, her voice broke the silence. "Foreclosure?" Gasps, murmurs, chairs scraping back. From where I stood, I could see the cousins peering in, passing their phones, trying to read over shoulders. I turned to face the room, not smiling, but not ashamed either. Then I walked back to my seat and sat down, while the chaos bloomed behind me. Because when a man builds a kingdom on someone else's back, he should expect it to collapse the second they step away. And that day, at that wedding, I didn't just step away. I pulled the ground out from under him. I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to wave my arms, make a speech, or raise my voice. All I had to do was deliver the truth in an envelope and let Kyle unravel himself. And he did, spectacularly. He tried to hold it together at first. Tried to smile, to laugh it off like I was playing some elaborate joke, like this was all a mistake that could be undone with a phone call. But panic doesn't hide well on a man who's never faced real consequence. His hand trembled as he fumbled through the rest of the pages. "I don't understand. What is this? You sold the property?" Alana was gripping his arm now. "You told me the bar was in your name." "It was. I mean, technically it is. Well, it was both our names. But she can't do this." He looked at me, eyes wide and searching, like maybe I'd crack and say, "Just kidding." I didn't blink. "I can," I said quietly. And I did. The room was frozen. People who'd been mid-bite or mid-toast now sat still, wine glasses suspended in mid-air. Mom stood, her voice already acidic. "Jenna, sit down. You're ruining his moment." "No," I said, calm and sharp. "I'm correcting it." She marched toward me like she had when I was 10 and forgot to fold the laundry, full of performative outrage and nothing else. "You couldn't have done this another day?" "I gave him months," I replied. "He ignored the bank. He ignored me. He used the loan to fund this wedding. I'm just handing him the bill." "But in front of everyone?" "Exactly in front of everyone. Because that's what they never understood. They were fine with humiliating me in public. When Kyle called me a leech at dinner, when they chuckled and let the lie stand, they weren't worried about my feelings. They weren't concerned with timing or decency. So no, they didn't get to be protected now. They got the same courtesy they gave me. Kyle had gone quiet, his face pale, hands still clutching the papers like they might burst into flames. "Why would you do this to me?" he asked finally, voice shaking. And I almost laughed, but I didn't, because I wanted him to sit in it. So I leaned forward and said what no one had ever dared tell him. You called me a leech, Kyle. You mocked me in front of Mom. You used my credit, my trust, and my silence, and then you erased me. His mouth opened, but I cut him off. I didn't ruin your wedding. I just delivered the truth. What you did with it, that's on you. Alana stood up. She was trembling. I want to know everything, she said to him. How much of our wedding did you pay for using her money? What else have you lied about? Nothing, he said too quickly. I mean, some things were just blurry. Jenna's always been dramatic. She's twisting this to get attention. I didn't respond, because the documents spoke louder than I ever could. Alana didn't even look at me as she walked off, just grabbed her dress and stormed toward the bridal suite, heels stabbing the grass with every furious step. Aunt Melissa, one of the few family members who had never spoken much but always watched too closely, turned to me with a stunned expression. You really did this? She whispered. I nodded once. She blinked, then slowly smiled. Well, she said, lifting her glass, about damn time. By the time dessert came out, sugar-glazed pears and lemon-curd tarts, half the guests had left. The DJ played soft jazz, but no one danced. The photographer put his camera down. And Kyle? He sat at the head table alone, staring at the papers in front of him like they might vanish if he blinked hard enough. They didn't. I walked out before they served coffee. There was no need for a dramatic exit. I didn't want a scene. I'd already had my moment. As I stepped into the evening light, I felt something lift from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since childhood. This wasn't revenge. This was release. This was the sound of my own life finally making sense. They say weddings are new beginnings. They're right. Because that night, I wasn't just ending Kyle's illusion of power. I was beginning something too. A life where I didn't let anyone rewrite me into the background. Where I didn't co-sign anyone else's chaos. Where silence wasn't my only form of survival. I didn't expect the aftermath to hit as quickly as it did. But by sunrise the next morning, my inbox had 3 messages from vendors I'd never spoken to. Florists, supply managers, and an event coordinator, all looking to confirm what they'd heard. That Kyle Carter's business had been sold, and that future contracts were no longer valid. The rumors had spread faster than wildfire. It didn't surprise me. I'd made sure of it. Kyle tried calling again. Blocked. Then Mom. Blocked. Then came the email. Subject line, please read. I hovered over it for a moment before clicking. I expected rage, insults, some dramatic claim of betrayal. But what I got was worse. It was desperation. You've made your point, loud and clear, but you don't have to go through with this. We're family, Jenna. Families fight. Then they make up. You don't really want to destroy me. Please, I'll pay back what I can. Just stop this. I read it once, then again, and felt nothing. There was no satisfaction in his panic, no gloating. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. Mine. That afternoon I received a call from Valerie. I have the wire confirmation. The money's in. You now have full control of the remaining funds. Did Kyle respond? No. His silence is in agreement at this point. And even if he did try, the window's closed. I exhaled. Not because I was relieved about the money, but because it meant the chapter was legally closed. The same man who mocked my value at dinner now sat jobless, assetless, and, according to Alana's rapidly vanishing online presence, potentially alone. I never checked in directly, but I heard things, whispers through family grapevines, quiet phone calls from cousins who had once sided with Kyle but were now just checking in. I didn't indulge them. I wasn't interested in being the family spectacle or the cautionary tale. They didn't get access to me now that the smoke had cleared. One aunt, Deborah, showed up at my door 2 weeks later with a Tupperware of peach cobbler and sad eyes. "I don't blame you," she said, as if that absolved her silence. "I don't need you to," I replied, holding the door frame like a barrier. "I needed you back then, when they laughed, when they lied. But no one said anything." She nodded, ashamed. "I just hope you're okay now." "I am." And I was. But I still didn't invite her in. Mom didn't go silent forever. She sent a handwritten letter that arrived nearly a month after the wedding. Her handwriting was stiff, careful, the same cursive she used for church programs and charity auctions. It read, "Jenna, what you did was cold, unforgivable really. But I suppose I played a part. I should have stopped him from saying what he did. I should have defended you more when you were younger. But we can't rewrite the past. What's done is done. I hope someday you'll come home, even if it's just for the holidays." Mom. There was no apology, just an admission that she'd noticed. A little too late. I folded the letter and tucked it away, not out of sentiment, but as proof that even the most stubborn matriarchs can't ignore a reckoning forever. As for Kyle, well, the last I heard, he was working part-time at a friend's catering company, trying to scrape together enough to break his lease. Alana had moved back in with her parents, citing irreconcilable differences after only 19 days of marriage. The prenup she'd insisted on? Ironclad. He left with less than he came in with. I didn't gloat, but I didn't feel bad either. Because I didn't destroy Kyle's life. I just removed myself from it. And the truth did the rest. I booked a solo trip to Maine that fall. Rented a small lakefront cabin for 2 weeks. No phone, no emails, just silence and trees and air that smelled like pine instead of perfume and pressure. I brought a journal, not to relive the pain, but to write a different kind of story. One where the woman wasn't the background, wasn't the scapegoat, wasn't the buffer between someone else's bad decisions and their comfort. She was the protagonist, and she owned every part of her ending. You don't realize how much of your life you've spent holding your breath until you finally exhale. That's what it felt like. Sitting on the porch of that little lakefront cabin in Maine, wrapped in a wool blanket, holding a mug of coffee while the wind moved softly through the trees. It didn't hit me all at once. It wasn't some dramatic cinematic moment. It was quiet, soft, freeing, like finally stepping out of clothes that never fit. I watched the lake ripple and thought about all the years I spent dimming myself to make other people feel big. Smaller reactions, quieter opinions, toned-down victories. I'd been taught that love was something you earned by shrinking, but shrinking never bought me peace, and silence never earned me respect. Kyle called me a leech, but I was the root, the structure, the spine. He just didn't know it, because I never demanded to be seen. Not until now. People always assume women like me are bitter. You hit your 40s, stay single, stay childless, stay stable, and they write you off. Like your life is a draft that never got finished. As if your existence only matters if someone else claims it. But I have never felt more whole than I do now. I'm not someone's backdrop anymore. I'm the whole damn scene. When I got back home from Maine, I made some changes. I took my old condo off the market and sold it, bought a brownstone in a quiet part of the city where the trees line the street and no one asks questions. I started my own small firm, just a few clients at first, enough to keep things flexible, enough to build something with my name on the paperwork. And I finally threw out the old file boxes labeled family. I shredded every bank statement, every receipt, every email Kyle ever sent me begging for help. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need to carry the proof anymore. I already knew the truth. And so did he. I still get calls sometimes. A cousin inviting me to another baby shower. A distant relative who wants to reconnect. I don't answer them. Not out of spite. but because peace has a volume. And once you hear it, everything else feels like static. One afternoon, I passed by a new cafe opening on the edge of town. Big windows, warm lights, the kind of place Kyle always claimed he'd open next, if only he had the funding. There was a grand opening sign taped to the door. I paused, smiled, and kept walking. Because the thing about people like Kyle is, they don't change until the applause stops. And I wasn't clapping anymore. I bumped into Alana once at a bookstore. She was alone, holding a novel and a reusable coffee cup. Her hair was shorter, her expression was calm. We locked eyes for a second. She gave me a small nod. "I figured it out," she said. "Too late, but I figured it out." I nodded back. "That's all that matters." And we parted ways, two women who had both survived a man who lied with a smile and called it charm. Sometimes people ask me if I'd do it all again, if I regret the timing, the delivery, the public humiliation, and I tell them the truth. I regret waiting so long. Because dignity is not a favor. It's not a currency to be traded for acceptance. It's a boundary. And boundaries don't need approval. On the 1-year anniversary of the wedding, I received a package. No note, just a small, empty picture frame. No photo, no message, just glass and wood. I knew it was from Kyle, some clumsy metaphor about erasure. But to me, it was perfect. A reminder that I didn't need their picture anymore. I had my own, and I liked the way it looked. They called me a leech. But parasites don't build empires. Parasites don't co-sign your future, protect your name, and carry your failures in silence. I wasn't a leech. I was the lifeline. And now, I'm the one who cut the cord.